Hey y'all, this is KalechippsDev. It's been a bit since the last devlog, but I've been spending a lot of time learning skills that were mostly new to me, like portrait drawing and music. But I'm excited to announce that this devlog, I'm introducing the beginnings of the new town area. So we're finally out of the dungeons, which is refreshing to be thinking about combat a little less, but that also means that I've had to start a new area basically from scratch. So that's part of the reason for the delay as well. Also, I've been researching a lot about writing music and drawing pixel art in order to have some placeholder assets for the town. So if you want to learn all about that process, stick around. Before we get started, I've included the couple of music pieces that I've wrote at the end of the video, so be sure to watch till the end if you want to learn about my music making process and hear those pieces. Alright, so yes, the town. At a high level, the town is a large non-combat area for the game. Again, this game is half exploring through dungeons and killing monsters, and half hanging out and making friends with the NPCs in a non-combat town. So we have multiple rooms with NPCs that walk around on individual schedules. So each person has an own schedule that can change day by day or season by season. There are two big parts of this. First, drawing up an architecture for all the rooms, so that's managing all the rooms and transitions between those rooms, and then designing NPCs, each of which has a schedule on each day. Both of these need to be pretty flexible, since nothing about the town is finalized yet. I got started on the NPCs first, by designing a schedule system. Each NPC has a routine, which consists of a bunch of activities which inherit from an abstract activity class. Now, if you're not super familiar with code, I'll try to explain it in more everyday terms. This means that a routine basically expects to just have a bunch of ordered activities, and each type of activity is implemented differently. So I can add as many types of activities as I want, but right now there are just two types. It's the head activity and the wait activity. The head activity is the NPC's way of moving between different places on the map. So right now the NPC just follows a path of different positions around the scene. This is a solution that is both easier to implement and is easier on CPU performance than a full pathfinding system. So instead of actually having to intelligently find a path, the NPCs just follow different waypoints that I set in the scene manually. But I'll admit that it's sort of tedious to set up each path manually, so this may be something that I'll revisit. I got caught up for a little bit getting the NPCs to stop when they're about to walk into the player, since it's a little different than detecting collisions for a stationary object like trees and rocks. I had a pretty quick fix in place that stopped the NPC if a player was in contact with it, but this caused the NPC to stop if you walked into it from the back or from the side, which didn't make sense. But after talking it out with some game devs in the YouTube Discord, thanks friends, I was able to figure out a solution where I send out a collider in the shape of the NPC in the direction of the movement. This is a way of anticipating collisions before they happen and only in the direction of the movement. So that's the head activity. Next, there's the wait activity. This is for when NPCs arrive at a destination and play an idle animation. I imagine this can be used for when an NPC goes to fish or do some idle activity. Their routine for that day would include a head activity to move to that location on the map, wherever they're going to fish or do whatever, and then a wait activity which plays a fishing animation until a certain time passes. Speaking of time, I also implemented a time system which tracks the time throughout the day. This is referenced by the wait activity, which plays whatever animation it's assigned until that time is reached. So there's a global time object, which keeps track of what hour and what minute it is, and each wait activity is tagged with at what time that activity should finish. So if a person wants to fish until, let's say, 2 p.m. in the afternoon, I can have them, whenever the day starts, head to that fishing location, and then when the time hits 2 o'clock, or in military time 14 o'clock, or 14 hour or something, they'll finish their idle activity and then move on to the next one. Anyway, with this structure, even though I only have 2 types of activities right now, I can implement any number of other activities that fit the structure. So an NPC follows a routine, which consists right now of a mix of wait and head activities. But once I add a bunch of NPCs, each with their own routines, the town starts to come alive a little bit. And I think once I have a bunch of different activities as well, this will be even more so. I drew up this little pink guy as a placeholder, which I did to make sure that the animations are working correctly, but it's obviously not the final art. So he faces where he's walking and plays an idle animation when he's not walking, and that's all controlled by various activities. Alright. Then I added a dialogue system so you're able to actually talk to the NPCs. So for this I imported the code from my GMTK jam game, Mission Control. I purposely designed the dialogue system in that game modularly so that I could bring it into this project pretty easily. I knew that's something that I wanted to do when I was going into it. This was just a matter of importing that code and hooking it up to trigger a text box when you approach an NPC and click E. This interrupts whatever activity they're currently doing until you finish talking to them, at which point they return to doing that. Alright, so this handles the NPCs. Then I started working on the second task, which was working on a room system that allows the player and NPCs to move between different rooms in the scene. But first, I did some level design and laid out the tiles and borders for a few rooms. This is by no means the final layout that I'll go with, but it has the features that I want when I will eventually design a real layout. To To let the player move between rooms, there's an invisible trigger at each door that plays a fade in and fade out animation. While this animation is playing, the player can't move, and when it finishes, they're transported to the other side of the door. Unity has a great camera system called Cinemachine that allows you to easily set bounds for where the camera shouldn't go. So while the camera follows the player, it also makes sure that it doesn't show anything outside of the border of the trees. This is all good and nice and super useful, but since each room has different bounds, I need to change the camera's bounds each time the player enters a new room. And for some reason, this was breaking everything when the player entered a new room. At first, I thought it was because the camera and boundary objects were on different Z layers, so I fixed them to line up. This didn't end up working, but I thought the footage was too cool not to show off. Just on the back end, in Unity 2D games actually have a third dimension, but it's usually not visible, and I haven't shown it off until now, so I just wanted to show it off real quick. Anyway, I was just about at my breaking point when I finally came across the answer in a Unity forum. Cinemachine caches its bounds when you press play, so if you want to change the bounds at runtime, you have to call this very cryptic function called invalidate path cache, whatever that means. Anyway, I called it, and it was a surprisingly quick fix. It was just that one line of code. Sometimes I guess that's all it is, it's just one line, you just gotta know what line that is. That's the real crux of coding, I guess. After this, implementing NPCs transition was super easy. It transports the NPC just like the player, but it doesn't have to handle any camera transitions or anything. So with these things finished, the starter code for Flourishing Town is now complete. Alright, so I don't really consider myself an artist, and I definitely need more practice in pixel art, especially if I'm going to be doing this game's art alone, which I am for now. One of the things really central to creating the NPCs is character portraits, so I decided it was about time that I really buckle down and draw something besides rocks and trees. This is footage of my first attempt at a townsperson. It's sort of just a generic girl for now, not sure who it is, I wasn't really going in with any specific persona in mind. And while it's definitely not ready to be shipped, I think it's a good start. I look forward to practicing a little bit each day and slowly adding pixel art to my list of skills as a game developer, and it's sort of exciting actually to have a lot of space to improve. Besides these portraits, I want to get started on drawing some character animations so the NPCs can actually move around. As much as I love this little pink guy, he's not really going to cut it for the final game. So I may have to take some time away from coding to make these assets. Alright, speaking of adding to my skills, I also spent a handful of days playing around with music. It's really refreshing to learn a new skill and practice being creative, and between both practicing new art and new music skills, it's been a pretty wild couple of weeks. I researched and tried out a bunch of DAWs, which stands for Digital Audio Workstation. It's basically an all-in-one digital music production software, and I decided after trying a bunch to finally go with the most popular one, called FL Studio, since it's pretty beginner-friendly and has a generous trial period where I was really able to get used to it. I don't have a super strong music theory background, but I did take piano lessons for just about a decade, so I do know my way around some chords. Anyway, with my program selected, I got started writing some music. My process consists of choosing a chord progression that sounds nice for whatever mood I'm going for, and then blocking that chord each measure and writing a melody on top of it. Then I replace the block chords with some kind of arpeggio or rhythm, and finally I add some auxiliary instruments to round out the piece wherever I think it needs it, and add some drums. I spent a long time listening to some of my favorite game music to get inspiration, and I was really blown away by how powerful it can be. Again, my strength lies mostly in coding, but I'm happy to be learning a new skill, and I don't think I did half bad for my first try. If you're interested, I'm going to play some of the pieces that I wrote in the order that I made them, so you can see how I got better over time. Again, this devlog has been a bit delayed, but I've been busy learning all these new skills alongside also having to code still, so hopefully by the next video, I'll be able to show off some newly improved art and music, and as always, a little bit more code. I don't know if I should return to the dungeons or finish up some stuff in the town, but it seems hard to keep working on town stuff without more art and music, so that may be what I'll have to do. Anyway, enjoy the music, and let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for sticking around, and as always, thanks y'all.